What's up, crew? Welcome to Filming in Progress, the show that takes you backstage into the world of local businesses and the people who make them shine. Our guest today is Nick Thompson, co-founder and president of VEA Office Professionals, bringing over 25 years of leadership and business expertise. Nick's achievements span from building award-winning companies to earning accolades for his philanthropic contributions. Nick, thanks so much for being here.
Thank you for having me, Aiden.
At what point did you realize that humans and people are the core of business?
Oh, great question. Gosh, I've always been in a service industry of some sort. Starting out, 13, I had my first job at a garden center, helping people carry plants out. I worked in the ski industry, teaching actually, ski instructing. I worked, done many jobs, but it's always been somewhat in the service industry, restaurants, bartending through my way through college, right? A lot of the things a lot of people do to earn a living when they're young. And I've always enjoyed dealing with people, kind of part of my nature. But it wasn't until I would say when I first got into business with my parents at our original marketing company, Metro Media here in Calgary. It was 96, and I was the 5th employee. And that was when I really got to understand that this isn't a casual, just personal relationship, that they're looking for value and we're looking to provide value. And it stepped it up from, I think all young adults should start in like restaurant, hotel and restaurant, because then they get to understand how to deal with people, right? Conflict, communication, critical conversations, that type of thing. And once they get out of that into the sort of real business world, if you will, if they're looking at starting a company, they have some more skills, interpersonal, social skills, which I think a lot of our youth is going to be lacking. I was listening to the radio on the way over here, and they were talking about what should we introduce, into our school system. And they were talking about financial literacy and everything. I'm like, what about social literacy, right? So, but when we first got into business and we're dealing with business people, I was 26 and feeling like real green, real young. A lot of our clients were corporate oil and gas in Calgary. So I was feeling quite out of place. And I realized if I was, number one, authentic, sincere, honest, and number two, they saw that I wanted their best interests in mind, I get great results, great conversations. People say, you know what, I want to do business with you because you're not giving me the marketing speech and the, all of the color behind. You're just saying it like it is. And I think humans like to deal with humans. AI aside, as a tool, but humans really do still enjoy, and I think we crave it more now, dealing with humans. One of the reasons we're here, right? Talking to each other. So I think that's when I sort of realized this is about people. And as we grew our business, we started to understand the more we support and grow our people, the more they will connect with our clients, the more we will grow. And so it became quite obvious to me that business is about people connecting with people. And you got to help people grow themselves if you want to grow. So yeah, that's where it started from.
Awesome. You mentioned there at the beginning that the youth these days might be lacking in that area. What do you think is the cause? Why is that?
Well, we're going to get up on a pedestal here, I think, a little bit. I think there's a couple of things. First of all, our school system, again, this was on the news today, is somewhat antiquated, and it's teaching some skills that, quite frankly, we don't need as much. Like the old meme about oh, I didn't know I would actually need that trigonometry when I started owning a business, because you don't, that sort of thing. So updating the school system, which I'm encouraged to hear that Canada's looking into right now, will help. Technology has, for all the great benefits, it has set our social skills back quite considerably, only to be accelerated by COVID, right? Because then we all had to sort of turtle in and deal with ourselves. So those people who were already introverts became more introverted. I know my own son had some depression issues prior to COVID, and COVID did not help. And so the technology that we're dealing with on the phone all the time, they're not interacting with other people, so they don't have that conflict resolution, critical thinking, decision making. We just go to Google and say, well, I'm going to pick that decision, right? And then Google does its algorithms and said, okay, now I'm just going to feed you more information on that, right? So it doesn't help us, get to that critical thinking that we need to as human beings, especially when we're conversing. So those are a couple of the big reasons. I would say that corporations did not help as we've gone through the last couple of decades. For profitability, for shareholder return, we need to, mind our dollars and cents, and I get that, and I'm in that world all the time with entrepreneurs. But at the same time, that takes the human element out of it. And then when you treat people like they're just there, I'm paying you to do that job, just do that job. If I don't like what you're doing, you're out, I'll replace you, it's easy. Then they become jaded and say, well, then I'm for myself. So I'm going to be more selfish when I get my next job. I'm going to look because you're not looking out for me. And then it's this revolving circle where now we're separating the desires of what the company wants to achieve versus what the individual wants to achieve. So those three factors, I would say, is causing this division that I think a lot of people are coming to that realization, it seems.
Definitely.
Yeah.
Definitely. How do you think, assuming that these youth have grown up not serving in the service industry, as you mentioned, or, are lacking in that area for whatever reason, how do you think we can go about, fixing that?
Yeah. Love it. So I think there's two main things. Number one is parents need to be more involved with their kids in general. I'm not saying all parents aren't. But I know when I was, when my kids were young, they're in their 20s now, but when they were young, I would go to their, sports games. I would go to their play recitals. I would go to all of it. That's the way I was brought up by my parents. They were very active in our lives. And I, now that I'm older, I see that I appreciate that. So I want to give that to my children. And so, I'm there to say, hey, what you did there with that kid, that wasn't cool. But that's not how we treat people, right? That's not how our family treats people. Or just giving them, my youngest son, he's in his mid-20s, he's buying a new vehicle right now. So I'm kind of coaching him a little bit on, let's talk about how you get the most out of your current vehicle, how you bargain for, the next vehicle, and giving them some of those sort of coaching skills. And when I was growing, when they were growing up, I noticed a lot of parents weren't around. There was maybe, I'm guesstimating, but around 20-25% of the class's parents were there. The rest were just dropping them off and picking them up. I had you got to go to school. And that really surprised me, that there were a lot of parents that weren't as involved with their kids' lives. So that's one. I think that needs to be more prominent. The second thing I would say is corporations. So any business, I don't care if you have one employee or thousands, need to continue to invest in the people, having them learn different skill sets, having opening up their mind to other opportunities. We can learn till the day we die, right? And usually on the day we die, I hear that we're reflecting on those things we haven't learned yet, So really important for companies to get into that continual education, expanding people, supporting people. What are their needs and dreams, and how can we help them achieve it? Because that's only going to help ourselves achieve where we want to go with our businesses, right? So those two, I would say, in my experience, would be the two top ones to help people learn and grow.
Awesome. I understand, and correct me if I'm wrong, that you've helped hundreds of businesses transform from the inside out, from the people side to the management side, et cetera.
Yes.
What is some of the commonalities that you see in these businesses when you're going in to help support them? Are there commonalities? Is everything unique, or what are some of these issues that you see and are able to deal with?
Yeah, thanks for asking. So I've been fortunate enough to, with the resources and growing that marketing company up into a large organization and having a large amount of staff, and then being able to help clients and suppliers, and then getting into business coaching, and then entrepreneurship training with EO globally. I've been very fortunate to deal with. I deal with several hundred companies a year, actually. And some of them I get, quite invested in because I see potential and I want to help them, and I just volunteer my time. Yes, there are a lot of commonalities. Every business is different. Even in the same industry, the same amount of people, even in the same community, all businesses are different because they have different leaders, right? And I was taught by a mentor years ago when I first got into business with my parents. One of my mentors said, the success or failure of your small business relies on one factor and one factor only, and that's you, right? It's the leader. And it's your capacity to learn and grow. It's your capacity to build people. It's your capacity to admit and work on mistakes. All those things it's your capacity to think bigger. It all relies on one person, one person's brain. And that scared the shit out of me, right? I'm like, if it relies on me, we're done, So that mentor said, they were a coach as well. And they said, I have a solution for you, and that's how we'll build a system that it doesn't rely on just your brain. You can get everybody self-managing so that you'll get opinions and they'll have some autonomy over their jobs and they can give ideas. And that really helped because I can honestly say every idea I've ever had has come from somewhere. It's not mine. So giving people the ability to want to give ideas and grow that way. So when we get back to what are the commonalities, we were often talking about culture building. How do we build a culture of self-accountability, self-performance, some autonomy in people's workloads? How do we get the communication, decision-making, where it's not always, going up the funnel to that one person, where that's the limiting factor, that they can actually work the organization, grow the organization by themselves organically. So building that culture has always been sort of the top commonality I see. And it starts with core values, having a purpose that's more altruistic than selling a widget or servicing or massage therapy. What are we actually doing for humans? What value are we providing? So that purpose as a guiding light, goal setting, then strategy. How are we going to roll out our vision and our goals and our purpose into a strategy, and then execution. Like, how do we put all this into a system? There's lots of systems out there, and it doesn't matter which one, but it's just getting a system, right? So from culture and then all the way through vision setting, purpose setting, strategy, and executing on it all. Those are the things that typically helping companies on. And one of the things that comes up all the time, and I coach, I do executive coaching for small businesses, but all the way up to $1 billion annual revenue and above. And I teach the exact same best practices because they need the same things, just one's got more zeros in their budget, right? And one of the things I see often is processes they're not written. So it's in people's heads. Very often, most companies that I work with, and it baffles me because if it's in somebody's head, it's being misinterpreted by everybody else, right? So I often will work on, okay, what are your main processes and how can you get them in writing? So it's, pictorial format, checklists, whatever, so that everybody in the organization understands exactly how that goes. So someone falls sick, someone else can step in, right? Hey, they're doing it one way, someone else says, oh, I have an idea to make it better. If it's not in writing, nobody can do that. There's no collaboration. And then people are saying, oh, I thought you were supposed to do that, right? I thought that was your part of your job. Well, no, actually it's not, right? If you have it in writing, then everybody knows their roles, right? So, take that into roles and responsibilities. Most of the time, I see executives that do not have written out, this is my performance description, everything that's expected of me, here are my goals, here are the percentages and metrics I'm supposed to meet in my certain jobs. Most executives don't have that written out. It's, well, you're a COO, so you're in charge of financials. What does that mean, right? Great, that's so ambiguous that how do we know if you're doing a good job as a COO if all the metrics and the score, we call a scorecard, is not there, right? So it's the same as procedures and policies that are, if they're written, then we also need to do that for our roles and responsibilities. That way when people are working, they're not crossing wires and not understanding, well, where does my job stop and someone else picks it up, right? So those are some commonalities.
Yeah. I'm extremely guilty of the lacking of process.
Most people are.
Yeah.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah. So if success is in individuals' hands, right? So like, I'm, as you said, you learned very early on, somebody told you that, it's up to you. Then the opposite would also be true, which is, we put problems in place for ourselves,
yes,
and then we're unable to overcome them.
Yes.
Why do you think that is? Why are we, why do those self-limiting beliefs exist, and how do we overcome them?
Yeah, self-limiting beliefs, great one. And we have some common friends that that help people through self-limiting beliefs. And, that comes from our childhoods, a lot of it, right? What is it? 80% of what we learn is before the age of 3, right? And a lot of that is psychological as well. And so, for example, when I was in elementary school, I was bullied. I was like, this is more gray now, but I was stark white hair. I looked like somewhat close to an albino, right? And so made a lot of fun of. As Nicholas on the camera can probably attest to, Nick rhymes with a lot of things. And so I got bullied as a kid about, all these rhymes, and I looked weird, right? So I had this stark white hair. I was pretty goofy, probably still am goofy, but I was different. And so I got bullied quite a bit. And to this day, I feel the effects of that. Now I got over it, and I actually confronted my bullies at that point. This is grade 4. Me and a friend tackled the bully outside of school and beat the snot out of him, and he never bullied us again. And then I became a fighter, right? So now I'm fighting for my rights, right? And that was what that taught me, fight for your rights. And so I fought for probably 3 years, and I was always getting in trouble for fighting. And then I realized I'm turning into the bully because I'm fighting for no reason. And so I stopped. Grade 7, I stopped. I said, I'm not going to fight anymore. And what that translates into when I'm getting into business is I don't like corporate bullies. That really gets under my skin, right? So I have this limiting belief that people are, they're looking to see how they can kind of get you and bully you. And it's helped in a lot of ways because I've been able to protect, different people in the business from being bullied. But in some ways, it's inhibited some of my ability to see opportunity because I'm like, I think that person could be somewhat of a bully. Maybe they are, maybe they're not, but I've already placed a judgment because that's in my head from childhood. So a lot of it comes from childhood. And we have to do a lot of self-reflection, a lot of the introspective work, do all the EQ testing and, all the discs and the profiles and those types of testing so you really get to understand yourself. I've taken so many tests, self-tests, and I really enjoy learning more and more. And I took this EQ test during COVID. And I said, okay, I've got a pretty good sense of where my EQ is, from being in business for as long. And the EQ coach, they went over the results and I'm like, no surprise, no surprise, no surprise. Yep, I get that's a strength. I get that's a weakness. No surprises. What did surprise me though, is when she started talking about, here is the shadow of your greatest strengths. And I was like, shadow? And I said, yeah. So this is a real strength. And the shadow, the opposite to that is if you overuse that or use it in the wrong situation, this can be the negative result from it. And I was just like, oh, that felt like a revelation to me. And here I am going, yeah, I mean, I know who I am quite well. And that one hit me like right here, right? And I thought about that and I'm like, that is amazing. So you never have something that you're not going to take away, right? So just learn. And I learned these things about myself. And yeah, I have some of these limiting beliefs, or I have these beliefs from childhood or other things that have happened throughout time. And if I know myself really well, I'll know how to approach it and deal with it and process it properly and come out on the other end stronger and a better human for it, right?
Awesome. You talk about the ability or the resilience maybe, and I think this is a commonality among entrepreneurs that we're capable of putting up with the shit.
Yeah, right.
Terms, right?
Yeah.
And so I think that translates also into bullying, and so I'm curious. It's quite easy when these bad things are happening to you to play victim, right? And then not kind of break out of that and not use that to your advantage or whatever the case may be. What are there characteristics that are necessary to kind of go about that, or is it just learned experience and perseverance, or what was it for you, and how has that translated from a young age in grade 4 to what you're doing now?
Great question again, Aiden. Awesome questions, by the way. So resilience is the single most important factor, or the biggest factor I see common amongst entrepreneurs. There's this level of resilience that I don't know where it necessarily comes from. Some people they have resilience and things can kind of just brush off their skin. Some people have to build that over time. But where I see entrepreneurs succeed more is when they have that higher degree of resilience, because you're battling shit every day, right? And business is literally going from one problem to another. You solve that problem, waiting for the next problem, waiting for the next problem. Like it's all problem, solution. And that puts, it makes it very unattractive, right? Do I want to run a business? Because it's all about problems. But when you build the tolerance, or you have the tolerance and have some more resilience, it becomes opportunity, right? So there's a problem, what's the opportunity for growth? There's a problem, what's the opportunity for growth? So there's a different mindset in a lot of entrepreneurs, that they're seeing problems more as, how do I grow? What's the opportunity? How can we benefit from this? How can we add value? And so, again, COVID, because it's more recent, is a great example. COVID hit, there are a bunch of companies stuck their head in the sand and said, we'll wait. We'll wait it out. And a lot of those companies aren't around anymore because COVID lasted a lot longer than we anticipated. And other companies said, okay, how do we provide more value? How do we work together to get through this? How can we help other people get through this? Where is the opportunity here? And the coaching company I work with is Results. And what they did is they started a whole slew of podcasts and blogs, similar to what you're doing, to bring more value to the community. Like, we can't be in front of you face to face, so we're going to bring it to you on screen, and we're going to provide as much value. So they have guest speakers like you do. In fact, very similar to what you're doing, building a community, and said that's what we're going to do until we can meet again, sort of thing, face to face. And what ended up happening, and it's a coaching company, that's all we do is face-to-face. So we did a lot of it online for 2 years, and lost very few clients because they were like, this company's going somewhere, they care about the people, they're setting up a community, they're investing time, energy, and money into making sure we're okay. I want to work with that company. And there are a lot of companies that said, we're just going to wait. right? So that's that resilience piece is a different mindset. And as I said, I don't know where it comes from. Some of it's, born with, some of it's learned, some of it's experienced over time. But when I see entrepreneurs that view everything as a problem and get quite depressed, and I've seen plenty, and can't seem to get themselves to see the opportunities in front, those are usually the ones that don't stay entrepreneurs. Yeah, that is definitely the biggest factor.
You discussed in there, well, as somebody who's been doing coaching for as long as you have, you've worked face to face a lot, and then you're forced to work virtually a lot. I'm curious as to how you think those two compare, and maybe it may be too soon to say, but are there lasting effects of dealing purely on a virtual level versus personal, and how is that unfolded coming out of COVID?
So I speak out of two sides of my mouth here, okay? Because the company that my wife and I have now, it's a fractional remote staffing company. So they're all remote, they all work virtually, right? So that's our business. And we set up that business, it was, years prior to COVID, because the way business was going, people needed staff, but couldn't afford full time and all the benefits and everything, right? Especially as you're growing a small company. So we saw this need in EO mainly, saying we can help companies. And so we built the company out of that. Now, in my executive coaching business, it's always in person. We have the executive team in the room, and we do it as much in person as possible, so then we can get the reactions and some of the little nuances with hands and feet to shuffling, and you can kind of see the emotions, and there's sidebar conversations that happen. You can't necessarily get that sort of rawness from doing it on virtual with breakout rooms, right? But we had to deal with what we had. So I took a bunch of online training myself, not being a tech guy at all. Took a number of, I became certified in online teaching. It's a Canadian institute, as did some of my peers. And bought some of the equipment. So I have a professional sort of office. And we said, we can do this. And we started delivering the coaching and doing it all online. And I said, at the beginning, man, I don't know if we ever need to meet again. Like, we can get just as much value out of these virtual meetings as we can in person. What's the point of bringing everybody together, right? And I said, I don't know that we'll ever come together full time again after this. So fast forward 2 years, and I have my very first, hey, we're back together. I have my very first meeting in person with an executive team. There are probably 10 on the executive team. And we had our full day planning session. And at lunchtime, I was sitting back listening to them talk about the morning. And I was like, man, was I wrong? Wow, this in-person stuff is far more valuable. People, even just a little, oh, that was a good thing you said, a little tap on the shoulder, that goes a long way, right? So having that little extra interpersonal touch points when people are live with each other, I noticed immediately I was totally wrong. Virtual cannot 100% replace it. We have a lot of meetings virtually. I do a lot of my weekly meetings now virtually for convenience for everybody. But we always do our sessions in real time together because of there's that extra value. You just can't quantify it, right? But you can see it in the room, and when they're coming out of the room, like, arms around each other, or someone, has an emotional, and then people can gather. I mean, I remember maybe it was my second or third back in the room, someone was having an emotional time, and everybody got around them and they did this group hug. And I had tears. You can't duplicate that online. So I think that it's a great tool, just like all the other technology, but I personally do not believe it can replace human interaction. Yeah.
I couldn't agree more. I think there's a big reason that we do this in person too. And if we had plenty of guests, it would be like, hey, can we do it virtually? No, because this is so important. I think, as you mentioned, picking up on social cues, body language is such a huge part. And I think without this, you lack half of the conversation, if not more, right? The words are only one thing, but the way that we're listening to each other, understanding each other, it's completely different. I think it kind of goes back to what we were saying earlier about, if people don't work in maybe not the service industry, but youth are kind of lacking that interpersonal skill set that needs to be developed.
Right, exactly. And even just coming here and being in your awesome space here, there's a different vibe to that, right? Like now there's a more personal connection because I got to see your operation, right? So now anytime I think about you and we talk about something, I'm like, oh yeah, I saw that thing in the corner and that was neat, that kind of stuff. So it just adds that value, right?
Well, hopefully not, because it's the bestiest day it's ever been. But I'm just kidding.
Yeah, it's all good.
I want to go back a little bit. You mentioned that you started working for your parents' company.
Yeah.
At what point did you realize that it's time to kind of step out on your own and start your own first business?
So the way it worked, so I worked in the ski industry for 10 years. So I went from ski instructor, I went to school for hotel, restaurant, and ski resort management in Toronto. And so I worked for Ski Hills, running their ski schools and doing marketing for some various ski hills around Canada. And my dad worked for the 80 Olympics when they were here. And after the Olympics, he was in charge of asset disposal for a few years. And then he said, I don't know what I'm going to do. So he was in the printing industry, but he was too old, too expensive to go back into the printing industry. So he approached my brother and I was living in Medicine Hat at the time, working at a ski hill down there, and said, I'm looking at buying a small business. I'll fund it. Do you two want to come into business with me? And eventually you'll be my retirement plan and buy your mom and I out. And my brother's heavily into the arts. He's like, business? No way. I love my arts. I'm staying in the arts. Very, very talented guy. Call him the talented one. And I said, well, if it's got something to do with marketing, that's where I come from, service. And so we started looking for companies. And I moved back up to Calgary in '96. We went to a pin manufacturer. We saw a small trucking company, a delivery company. We probably looked at 50 different companies. We landed on this little marketing company that did promotional products. Okay. And so again, I came on as the 5th employee. So they were doing a bit of business and didn't qualify for EO at that time for sure. And worked there. I started in the warehouse, then I worked in customer service, then I did some sales. Then I became a supervisor, then I became a general manager. So that was '96. In 2000, way sooner than I thought would happen, my dad says, okay, I'm ready, I'm done, time for you to buy me out. I'm like, it's been 4 years. And he said, I think you've done pretty good. We had a great relationship. He's in a home with dementia now, so I say had, but he's still around. But definitely one of my greatest mentors in life and business. But he said, I'm ready to retire. So we got in a consultant that became a mentor. He's the one that talked about the top person, that's your success or limit. And had him consult with us for a year, and we did a transition where he was president CEO, I was general manager, and then we switched. And just communicated it to the staff. And at that time, there was maybe 18, 20 staff. And within a year, he was just coming into the office to say hi every so often. He's done, right? And so we did a buyout program and an agreement, all in writing professionally, made sure it was in writing. That was a great point. Made sure the agreement is in writing. And over the course of the next 7 years, I bought him out. And he hardly came in. I did have a caveat. I said, on $1, I want controlling share, because if I have that hanging over my head till year 4 or 5, it's never going to feel like I'm always going to feel constricted. And so we had some agreements around that. And in 2001, so a year later, 2001, I joined EO. It was actually a friend of my dad's, another mentor. Told my dad about EO and said, hey, your son's growing this business. He needs to join EO. So just qualified at that point for EO in 2001. And the business started to shoot out because I started learning all these concepts, right, that EO teaches. All the best business practices, learning from peers, hearing some ideas from other industries that I thought, maybe if I put that idea into my industry, it might become quite revolutionary, and just listening and learning. And by 2010, I merged with 4 other companies in Canada. So we became the largest promotional products company in Canada by far at that point. And by 2015, we had 350 employees, 20 locations in North America, warehousing on 5 continents on the globe. We're doing it for some very large companies. And we had, just topped the $100 million gross revenue mark. And so it was becoming fairly substantial business, and we were looking to expand further. So we merged with a US company. It's actually after we merged with the US company is when we did those numbers. And we formed a new board of directors, and things went south. We had it was comprised of, I believe it was three Canadian shareholders, 3 American shareholders, and 3 outside board members, not part of the business. And they were very, very smart people. Like, these 3 were from outside large firms, past chairs of, a Fortune 1000 company. Like, and I'm thinking, man, these are really smart people. They're going to help us go places. But what sometimes the real smart people with big organizations, as we were talking about earlier, said, we don't really care as much about the people. We care about shareholder return. And day one, so we had a party in 2015 to this big merge, and we had a board meeting the next day. And one of the first things said, okay, time to cut the fat. And I said, what are we talking about here? Well, we think there's probably 60 to 80 people out of the 350 that we can cut pretty quick, because there's going to be some redundant roles and so forth. And I said, yeah, but slow down, slow your roll here a little bit. We built this company by building people. That's my whole motto now, right? They're like, this is about shareholder return. So we're going to have to get off of that and start having these conversations. So in the US, they don't have the same employment laws. We're very heavily weighted in Canada, as you know, to the employee. But this group didn't understand that. So they basically did this blanket and said, we're letting you go today, and here's 3 weeks severance. And we had lawsuits coming in. I said, oh, what are we doing? This is not how we're supposed to be treating people. So all these people that were like family, now all of a sudden they're like, well, if you're going to do, I'm going to go lawyer up because I'm due way more than 3 weeks severance. And they're like, no problem. That's part of the negotiation. So they're looking at it as just business. Over here, the employees are like, no, it's my life, right? And there's a big disconnect. And so I'm constantly on the board saying, we can't do this, we can't do this. And so I'm becoming a thorn in the board now, my own board, right? It ended up in 2017. I was talking to, my wife, Lana, saying, I don't know what to do. They're not listening to me. And she said, do you think that you can get them to turn around and listen to you and you can fix this situation? Because it was starting to spiral. People were starting to leave because they saw how people were getting fired. And I said, no, I don't. They think I'm stupid. They won't listen to me. And so she said, well, I think you made your decision. So in 2017, I gave them a final ultimatum that if we don't turn around how we treat people, I'm just going to leave. And they said, okay, see ya. So in July 1 of 2017, I was standing on the outside of the company I founded, and I wasn't part of it anymore. So really upsetting. In early 2020, they claimed bankruptcy, and they don't exist anymore. They're gone. And so a lot of people say, hey, don't you feel like vindicted? Like you were right. And I said, no, I don't. They killed my baby. I'll never get over that, right? And it's why I wrote that book on the biggest pitfalls of business. First of all, I wrote it as, to be cathartic and therapeutic. And then some peers of mine in EO said, man, that is a different type of business book, because it's about all the bad things to look out for. It's not one of those, do this and then you'll be in a utopian business. So they told me I should turn it into a book and get it out there. So I did. And then that sort of was a new engine to me wanting to help entrepreneurs and businesses grow, right? Here's something, these are the great best practices, but here's all the pitfalls to look after as well, because you got to look at both sides. So it's kind of the story of how, I came to be where I am.
Thank you for sharing that.
Yeah, my pleasure.
Looking back on that experience, especially those early days of bringing those people on and doing those mergers and that sort of thing, obviously there was some immediate return, as you mentioned, the numbers you were hitting, et cetera. But I'm curious, based on what you know now, several years later, would you do anything differently?
Oh, 100%. And again, a lot of the things I would do differently is in that book. But several things that I would do differently. Whether it would have had a different outcome, we'll never know, but this is what I would do differently. First of all, in looking back, and hindsight is 2020, I did see some red flags with this other group that we were looking at merging with. But because they won a bunch of culture awards, and we're like, that to me is important. And they were doing things in the industry and getting the notoriety. I was looking at that side of it, and not some of these conversations that I'm hearing happening. There's a employee that was really upset of the way they were let go. And then there was another one in that company before we merged. So there were several people, and there was a little pattern there, and I don't know. There's so many good things over here, right? So I was kind of ignoring some of the signs. So obviously now I go in a lot more wary, and I listen to those signs, right? So had I listened to them, we wouldn't have merged. That wouldn't have happened. Would we be better off? Who knows? Things could still spiral, the COVID hurt that industry anyway, right? So that's one thing. The other thing is I was chair of the board for our company. And I said, look, at that time, my kids were young. I have young kids. I got a family. One of my partners, no kids, was from a $300 million company originally as the CEO. So a new, bigger business. Love to travel. And I said, hey, this being the chair, you're going to have to travel all over the world now. I don't want to be away from my family that long and that many times. You enjoy doing it. You don't have kids. You've run a company where we're going. You should be chair, right? And I view that as a mistake. And the mistake is I gave the hammer over, right? The real power of the board over. And not that he misused it at all, but the group that we merged with bullied, right? So here comes that term again. They bullied him into making some decisions that were not in the best interest of all the people in the company. It was about shareholder return and that sort of thing. And I know, right, based on our previous conversation, full circle, that I wouldn't have been bullied. Now that could have caused more problems, but I know that I wouldn't be bullied into that. And I think some of that bullying caused some decisions to cause these two groups to separate more and more and more to the point where it just couldn't work together, right? So I gave up the hammer, and I shouldn't have. So those are the two sort of biggest sort of things I would take back and do differently. The only other one that comes to mind is that we did have some of our own financial red flags in our business in Canada that I believed. I said, well, that, the CFO brought it to my attention. Like, there's a problem over here with a liability owed to one of our clients. And I said, well, that'll sort itself out. We're working on this huge merge over here, right? And so I sort of let that slide. That ended up becoming quite a crutch. In our merge, in our relationship with the new group, it ended up being kind of a bone of contention. And I should have, as the chair of the board, I should have brought that forward and, dealt with it sooner, much sooner. So I was ignoring some of those. One of the terms, I didn't even know the word hubris until after. I didn't know that word. And so, in doing some of the research for my book, I was like, that's what I had. I had this blind sense of confidence because every decision I made up until that point was just like, it was like the guy with the golden spoon, right? Like, I just kept, they're like, well, what do you think? And I said, well, I think we should do this. So they said, well, we're going to trust you because every time you make a decision, money flows, right? And so I became too confident in that, and I didn't look at the red flags. So I was dealing with a lot of hubris, although I don't, I like to say I don't have a very big ego, but that hubris can kick in, right? And so I didn't see that at the time. So now I'm much more cautious, right? Thoughtful, purposeful. I analyze a lot more of the angles, and I try and dig up more information. I'm not a researcher, so it's now something I've sort of learned to do more of. So those are the big things that I would change, and who knows, right? I like where we're at. So, at the end of the day, we're here because of all the decisions we made, and I probably looked in the mirror for, I had a 2-year severance package, and I just said, I'm not going to work. I'm not going to take anything on. I'm just going to kind of sort out my feelings here and what I want to do next. And for those 2 years, I looked in the mirror every morning. I came up with a mantra and talked to myself in the morning saying, you mean well for people, you believe in people, you're not here in this position because you stayed true to your values of how you treat people, and that's why you're here. And I would say this in the mirror because I was down, right? And what kind of came out of that is understanding that I'm not here to blame anybody. I'm here because of all the decisions I made. At the end of the day, I was chair of the company, and the whole shareholder group said, well, Nick, you're the guy with the golden spoon in your mouth, whatever, golden goose, whatever you want to say. What do you think? And I said, I think we should merge. So can I blame anybody? I convinced our group to merge. And I convinced our group to do a number of things. And I didn't look at some of the red flags, et cetera, et cetera. So after all this looking in the mirror, and I'm like, I put myself here. So I can't be the one to be, oh, woe is me, and I'm, singing the sad story, because at the end of the day, I got to be real with myself. I put me here from the decisions I made, right? And one of the decisions I made was to leave the company because I couldn't change it for the better. So all those decisions adds up to where I am today. That's nobody else. Nobody put me here. So once I actually came to that realization, Aidan, it freed me. Because then I didn't have blame and hate and resentment and all those things in my heart. I could go, all right, well, if all those decisions put me here, what decisions am I gonna make now to put me in the next place, right? So a lot of introspective work. Yeah, a lot of soul digging.
No doubt.
Yeah.
But yeah, there's a huge element of extreme ownership. And it sounds like, throughout our conversation that this wasn't the first time. Maybe it was the most impactful, but it wasn't the first time that you've had to kind of come to that realization. And
Totally.
So what was it? Because a lot of people are dealing with that place, whether it be a small decision that they made that's kind of they're beating themselves up over, or a huge decision, or a series of them.
Yeah.
What ultimately got you out of that space and said, okay, I'm gonna cruise towards the next thing headstrong?
Yeah. So again, I believe I had a fair amount of resilience growing up with some of this stuff. Beating up my childhood bully helped me gain confidence that, I can be in control of some of these outside forces. And then dealing with various issues throughout growing the business. And we had, pitfalls we were dealing with. I had my accountant, when we were a smaller business, found out was fraudulently taking money from the company, over $100,000 over a course of a number of years. That was real tough because I treated her like my sister. And so we had to go through all of that. And then 2008, I got divorced around the same time as this fraudulent activity. And I was just another low. And I'm like, okay, so where am I now? And where can how do I get to the other side, knowing that what I do is going to affect all these families that work at the company, right? So again, the limiting factor is me, and I don't want to limit everybody else at the company. So then I got this new sense of purpose, where I'm like, I can't have all the people at the company suffer for something that had nothing to do with them. So now I'm like, whoa, I better suck some of this up. I still go through all the emotions and deal with it, but at the same time, I have this responsibility, and the responsibility to other people is heavier than what I'm dealing with just for myself. And so that gave me this sort of sense of purpose. And so as I dealt with some of those situations and coming into this, what I would call one of the most significant, issues in my life, I built that up where I could say, where's my responsibility here? Right? You gotta be real honest with yourself, right? The only reason we're sitting where we are today is because of all the decisions we made. That's it, right? We experienced something because we made a decision to put ourselves in that place to experience it. Good, bad, ugly, doesn't matter. And when you continue to look at again, that different mindset, right, it's actually quite freeing, because you're like, okay, I can't control things to work out perfectly. I mean, let's be real. But if I know that I am human, I'm going to make mistakes, then great. I'll make the mistake, I'll learn from the mistake, I'll prevent it, and I'll move on knowing, know better, do better, right? And it's a lot of that self-talk over 2 years in a mirror, saying what are you going to do about it? What's your part in it? What is your responsibility? What is your accountability? And that made me kind of come to realize, all right, I'll make a mistake. I have no problem admitting I make mistakes. No human doesn't make a mistake. So I freely admit the mistake and say, I apologize for the mistake. How can I make it better? And how can we grow from it, right? And prevent it from happening again. So, it's learned through some of those, but I do a lot of, more and more self-reflection on these topics. Now we have more tools available to us, right? EQ learning wasn't there 10 years ago, probably, right? EQ was a thing. Now we can learn about it, and there's research, and there's books, and there's tests, and we can do counseling for it, and meditations for it, and all sorts of different things, right? Microdosing, if that's up to, if that's something people want to do. But there's all sorts of ways of actually getting to kind of understand our own psyches now, which we didn't have 10, 15, 20 years ago at all. So, I encourage people to really delve into themselves, because that is the best way. The best way to grow other people is grow yourself first, right? So grow yourself, grow other people. All the business is going to follow from that, right?
Full circle.
Yeah. Full circle. 100%. Yeah.
You've hinted at it a couple times, but the pressures of being a founder, and you're taking on responsibility for hundreds, tens, thousands, whatever it may be, of livelihoods. How do you deal with that pressure of ensuring that we've talked about it a lot on this podcast, but where maybe there's not enough to make payroll, so what's the sacrifice that you're going to make? How are you going to deal with that? But how do you deal with that pressure? That's one example.
Yeah, I mean, it's a constant pressure. So and all that means is you care, right? That pressure is there, so you can sort of look at yourself and say, I know why I'm feeling this is because I care, and that's noble. So I'll let myself care. And my wife and I go through this all the time because she's extremely caring of other, very, very empathetic person. And it's hard for her sometimes. And I have to say, this is part of business, right? And we chose to be in a business where we employ people, right? And they make a choice to follow us, but it's our responsibility to make sure if we chose to employ people, then we're choosing to make sure we take care of them. And we'll pick people over our own profitability because that's our value. And I've always find, through all these stories, if you stay true to what you really value, you will have very little regret. It's when you go off of your values and do something else where regret kicks in. So we're like, you know what? We can't pay ourselves this month. Because we want to make payroll, and we've been in that situation. I feel fine about that because I'm helping other people grow. That's my purpose and passion and my value, and same with my wife. And so we will make those sacrifices, and I was going to say happily do it. There's not really a happy do it, but but do it without regret or remorse because we're staying true to our values. And it's the same when we have a number of loved ones and people that we work with going through some hard times, personally or professionally, and in their own families. And we want to be there to support them. And so we'll provide all the support we can because, again, that stays true to our values. Is it something we have to do? No. It's not even expected of us. But to us, that's helping them, right? And then that's our purpose. So we will go out of our way to do that. So when we come back to what drives us, it makes it easier to make those decisions that aren't fun, but you're staying aligned to your values, right? And it's taken us a long time to get there, but now every time we're like, okay, so what's our value here, right? Do we walk away from that situation? Do we help in that situation? Or like what is our value and how do we act in our values?
Yeah, I think that's so important is checking your decisions against your values and that sort of thing. But just as easily, it's simple or easy for people to kind of say, I'm going to do the easy way this time, and then I'll make the right decision next time, and that'll align, right? Are there checks and balances or tactics or anything like that you recommend for ensuring that you're always aligned with your values?
Yeah, another great question. So the one thing that is really important is that people, same as you write core values for a company, you do that for yourself. You discover what are my true values. And it's not something I aspire to be. I want to always aspire to tell the truth, or, right? Sometimes we have white lies for the benefit of other people's feelings. That's part of humanity. But it's what do I really value? And so there's, again, introspective work to be done on defining your own personal values. Hopefully usually they will align with your company's values because it comes from you as the founder. But they'll be different sometimes. So I always felt that because I grew up in a very strong family unit, I always felt like family first. That was kind of something that came out of my investigation on my own values when I was younger. And I would define what family first meant. Like if there is something going on in the business and something going on where my family needs me, I'm going to tell everybody, I'm sorry, but family first, I'm going to go deal with my family. Now, if I say that, that means if something's going on in an employee's family, I'm going to say, go deal with your family first, right? I have to be congruent. So I'd sort of specify what family first means, where are the sort of guideposts to that. That's a value. And then I'm a big believer in like seizing the moment, living life, breathing life. Go big or go home was a thing we used to have in our ski group. And it was like you get to the edge of this cliff and you're like, it's go big or go home, right? Like, so you're either going to do it or you're not, right? And okay, let's go. And I've always been, just breathe in everything you can, absorb everything around you, stop to smell the roses. So, breathing life is one of my values, and I have examples of that, right? So I go through those. I have 5 personal ones, and I have them written, right? I have them written on a piece of paper, and that piece of paper is in my work folder, and it's been in there for 25 years. And I go in and I review it all the time. And I think about, am I making the right decisions based on the values? Have I made some decisions against values? Because we're human, you will, right? How did that affect me? And eventually I come to understand that when I'm most at peace is when I'm living clean on those values, right? When I've got that anxiety, right? And, anxiety is worry about the future or someplace you're not. It's often because something is incongruent with the values, and how can I make a decision or take some action to bring those two together where whatever's happening is congruent with my values, and then I feel that weight lifted off. So I check in with those values all the time. And I've got another book coming out on defining your own success and what that looks like for you. And one of the main parts in there is I've got a little system on how people can sort of discover their own values and give them some sort of key exercises and some words and that kind of thing, just for people to mull it over because they're all different. But that's what I took myself through to get there. And I find that my guiding light. So I call it my to-do list. It's my bucket list. So all the things I want to achieve personally, professionally, family, and even financially, and even some frivolous things. And I have my values in there. And then I have how I want, like if treating people is so important to me, how do I want to treat people? How do I want to show up? Right. So this morning, I know I'm coming to meet you, and I'm like, I want to show up as my authentic self. I want to be here to provide value to your audience. I want to connect. And I think about how I want to show up every day.
Awesome. There's so much self-awareness that stems from. And then I think also importantly, being able to communicate that to the people around you, right? So whether that be your team and be like, this is what I value, so that will be translated to the way I treat you.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. And having them understand it. Like we take our team through all this kind of stuff too, because we want them to learn and grow for themselves and define their own, what success looks like for them. Because it's not about money, right? It's happiness comes from gratitude. Gratitude does not come from happiness. So we want to, how can we define more moments that will make you grateful based on who you are? Because that'll bring more happiness. So how can we help them get to that level of understanding themselves, and they become happier people, and that shows when they're talking to clients and vendors, and the group as a whole are very they're a community, a strong community, because everyone's getting that sense of we're here for each other, right?
On that note, what does success look like to you?
Thanks for asking. Success to me is the path I'm on right now is helping hundreds, thousands of business leaders and businesses grow, thereby affecting all of the people that are employed in those. And I don't have a number. I'm not looking for a goal. I just want to continue to live. That's my authenticity, and I want to continue to live that. And everything I do is related to that. If it's not, I won't participate. So I believe that path is my successful path. And I absolutely love seeing when someone says, oh, that conversation we had, I put that into play and we just got 10 new clients, or because of that, I was able to help my employee through a hard family situation. Like, I'm just like, man, I was able to help with that. That means so much to me. like just to leave that little mark. I don't want to be rich and famous. That's not what I'm here for. I want to leave a mark on people to say, that really helped me. Yeah.
That statement aligns with everything we've discussed today. It's apparent to me, and I'm sure the audience, that that's what you're here to do.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And care about that individual, care about that employee, care about that person beside you, and push them up. A rising tide kind of raises all those kind of situations.
Right.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Awesome.
Yeah.
What's next for you? You said a new book coming out?
Yeah, I've got a new book. It's ready to get published. We are going to be rebranding our company. And so the rebrand's going to involve a much larger suite of tools and resources to help leaders and businesses grow. So we're going to incorporate a lot of other contacts in there, and I've got some new business ideas to put in there. All resources for helping growth. So we're going to be doing that. And I'm looking currently at doing more keynote speaking. So I've done some, but I haven't advertised for that because, again, I don't, you've got Simon Sinek and Jim Collins and Adam Grant. They're amazing, and I follow all of them. Tim Ferriss, but I don't want to be them. I don't want to be in the spotlight per se. And so I've always kind of laid off, I know I'm talking to a video marketing company. I've always laid off the marketing on that because I'm always like, I don't want to be like the face of the company and everything has to revolve around me. I'm not saying that they're egotistical, those people. They're trying to provide value too, and they are a great value. But I didn't want to be in the spotlight. So I steered away from that. And a friend of mine said, do you know how many people are suffering right now because they didn't have access to some of your resources and your book? And I was like, oh, that hit me hard. If that's my whole purpose, and by not promoting myself, I literally could be saving more or helping more businesses and leaders grow. I was like, wow, that's a good point. So I'm going to start doing more of that. Getting my name out there, getting in front of more entrepreneurs. I want entrepreneurs to get this book. It's on Amazon and everything, but I sell it at like literally no profit, just because I want it out there. But I'm going to promote more. Keynote speaking, the book. Getting out to more larger audiences. That's in my near future.
Awesome. I love what your friend said to you. I think that holds so true for so many things. I mean, we can all relate to hearing that one thing, even if that video has 10 views or that post has 20 likes.
Right.
But it resonated with somebody.
Right.
You don't know who, or you don't know how it affected them, but it did.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. One person, that's making a difference.
Yeah.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Where can we send people to follow along your next steps, the next journey? How can people contact you?
Yeah, so I've got LinkedIn for sure. I do a lot of the content in LinkedIn. Facebook, it's a little bit more personal. Instagram's all the jokes, basically. I follow that just for entertainment. But certainly LinkedIn would be the place to connect. Happy to connect there. I am starting to put more and more content on there too. And it's really just... I posted something today about work-life balance is a farce because we work 66% of our lives. So how can we balance it with life, what we call life, that we need to change our mindset. Work is part of life, and how do we have life balance? And I give some tools on there on how people can, achieve more balance in their own lives if that's something they're looking for. So I'm doing more of that type of thing. It's purely just to get, try and get those couple of people that might resonate with and help, right? So that's probably the best place. I do have nickthompsonbooks.com is where my book is. My new book will go there as well. And all the podcasts, like this one, will be on there. So people can review the content and learn some different, I've had lots of different conversations. This one's been great, Aiden. We've gone quite deep. You've pulled at my soul a little bit here today, which is fantastic. You said you were going to do that. But people can review that and learn some stuff from those things as well.
Awesome. Well, yeah, I think if today's conversation is anything along the lines of a testament to, what you're going to be posting on LinkedIn and the content that you plan on putting out and promoting yourself, then I'm sure everybody's going to want to follow. So, Nick, thanks so much for being here. Thanks for this conversation. It was incredible, and I really appreciate your time.
Thanks for having me. I really appreciate it.